Have you ever noticed that, at times, a single minute seems to drag on as if the world has gone into slow motion, while, at other times, entire hours simply evaporate without a trace? You look at the clock, check again, and the feeling is always the same. Something doesn't add up. Time passed too quickly. Or too slowly. And then that nagging, almost automatic question arises: how is that possible? Now let me tease you a little more. What if the time you perceive isn't the real time? What if that feeling, so solid, so obvious, so present in your life, is just a construct of the brain? Think about that for a few seconds. Because what you're about to discover might surprise you more than you imagine. From childhood we learn that time is fixed. A second always has 1 second. A minute always has 60 seconds. The clock doesn't lie. The calendar doesn't fail. But, curiously, your experience with time fails all the time. Have you ever experienced this? That endless meeting that seems to drain your energy while the minutes refuse to pass. Or that encounter, that conversation, that specific moment when you blink, and it's already over. The clock keeps ticking. But your perception of time collapses. And here's where the discomfort begins. Because if time were truly something absolute within your mind, this shouldn't happen. But it does. Psychological time stretches, compresses, distorts. It seems real. And it feels real. But maybe it's not what you think it is. The human brain wasn't designed to measure time like a stopwatch. It doesn't count seconds. It doesn't add up minutes. It does something much stranger, and much more efficient for survival. It constructs the sensation of time from emotions, attention, memories, and expectations. That's why time seems to speed up when you're immersed in something pleasurable. That's why it slows down in situations of fear, anxiety, or pain. Time, as you experience it, isn't on the clock. It's happening inside your mind. And perhaps that's exactly what makes it all so disturbing. Because if your perception of time can be manipulated by emotional states, then the now you're experiencing isn't as reliable as it seems. Think about it. In moments of danger, many people report that everything happens in slow motion. Every detail becomes sharper. Every second seems to multiply. It's not that time has changed. It's that the brain has entered another mode of operation. A mode where reality is re-edited in real time. Stay with me until the end because this is going to get even deeper. What we call the present may not be exactly the present. There's a slight delay between the world outside and the version that reaches your consciousness. The now that you feel has already passed. The brain is always a few milliseconds behind, reconstructing the world based on incomplete signals. Even so, the feeling is one of absolute certainty. You feel you are living in real time. But are you really? This tension between physical time and perceived time is one of the most fascinating mysteries of the human mind. We're not talking about science fiction. We're talking about neuroscience, perception, and consciousness. We're talking about the difference between what and what appears to be, and it is precisely in this strange space, between objective reality and subjective experience, that the most disconcerting questions arise about who we are and how we experience life. It is this type of questioning that defines the philosophical essence of dark human science, to look at what seems too obvious, and be suspicious. Because often that's where the brain hides its greatest illusions. So take a deep breath. Because from here on out, we're entering a territory where time ceases to be just a measurement, and begins to reveal its true nature. What comes next may completely change how you see every second of your life. And if, at any point in this video you felt a slight tightness in your chest, or that strange feeling of, that explains a lot, know that you are not alone. This type of reaction doesn't happen by chance. It appears when something directly affects how you perceive your own reality. And that's exactly why I wanted to invite you to be an active part of this conversation. If this topic makes sense to you, leave a comment below telling us what has touched you the most. So it could be a memory, a situation where time seemed to bend, accelerate, or simply lose its meaning. When you write, you're not just recounting a personal experience. You're helping other people realize that they've also lived through it, even without being able to explain it. The comments become a space for real exchange, almost like a collective mirror of the human mind. And if, at some point, you felt that silent urge to agree, to reflect, to pay closer attention to the time you are living in, liking this video is a simple way of saying, this matters, not only for me but for the algorithm itself, which understands that this type of content deserves to reach more people who are out there feeling the same doubts, but without the right words to express them. Now, if you realize that these themes touch on something deeper, if you enjoy questioning the obvious, exploring the mysteries of the brain, perception, and consciousness, subscribing to the channel is a way to continue this journey together. It's not about numbers. It's about forming a community of curious, restless people who aren't satisfied with superficial answers. Each subscription strengthens this space and allows this type of content to continue existing and evolving. Your participation here truly makes a difference. It sustains the channel's continuity, broadens the reach of the message, and creates an environment where thinking, feeling, and questioning are not only allowed, they are encouraged. And now that you've realized that time may not be what it always seemed, it's worth going even deeper. Because what follows reveals how the brain constructs this sensation second by second, and why, even without realizing it, you may be living in a time that doesn't exist exactly as you imagine it. There's something profoundly human about this strangeness with time. Something that transcends age, culture, routine, profession. Everyone has felt it, even if they've never stopped to put it into words. The line that doesn't move. You look ahead, you look behind, you check your phone, you put your phone away, you sigh, and nothing changes. Each minute feels heavy, almost physical, as if it could be pushed away with your hands. The body is there, still, but the mind begins to wander, to get irritated, to create small internal narratives. And the more you pay attention to the clock, the more time seems to resist. It's not just boredom. It's a real feeling of time dilation. Now compare that to a completely different situation. A moment of danger. A near accident. A sudden fright. People who experience this often report something very specific. Everything slows down. Sounds become clearer, movements seem longer, the environment gains an almost absurd clarity. In a few seconds, the brain registers details that would normally go unnoticed. Not because the world has slowed down, but because the mind has entered a state of maximum alert. Perception changes. Time changes along with it. And this change is so intense that it is recorded as a remarkable experience, almost outside the normal course of life. And then there's the other extreme. A good conversation. An unexpected encounter. A topic that captivates, engages, connects. You start talking about something simple and, before you know it, hours have passed. The sky has already changed color. Your body shows signs of tiredness that you ignored. And then comes that classic phrase, "Wow, I didn't even see the time go by." This phrase seems innocent, but it carries a powerful revelation. You don't saw time passed because the brain was too busy constructing meaning, emotion, and exchange. Time didn't disappear. It simply ceased to be perceived as a separate unit. These three situations seem nothing extraordinary at first glance. They are part of everyday life. That's precisely why they are so important. They show that the perception of time is not stable. It's not reliable. It's not a straight line that runs from the past to the future in the same way for everyone all the time. It changes according to the context, according to attention, according to the internal state. This is not weakness. It's brain function. The brain wasn't made to measure time. It was made to make decisions, to interpret threats, to seek pleasure, to construct meaning. Time, within this logic, is merely a consequence, a kind of byproduct of how the mind organizes experience. When you're bored, the brain enters a state of low stimulation. It starts searching for anything that will break that void. And, since it doesn't find it, the perception of time lengthens. When you're in danger, the brain prioritizes survival. It expands perception to increase the chances of reaction. When you're involved in something meaningful, the brain enters a state of flow. And time ceases to be relevant information. This completely changes how we understand that common feeling that time is passing faster. Many people associate this only with age, but the hidden truth is more complex. As the years go by, routines become more predictable. Fewer novelties. Fewer experiences that break the pattern. And, for the brain, fewer novelties mean fewer temporal milestones. The result is a past that seems too short when you look back. Not because life passed quickly, but because it was recorded with fewer variations. Do you realize the impact of this? How you live your day directly influences how you perceive your own journey. It's not just about the clock or the calendar. It's about mindset, attention, choices. The brain constructs time based on what you consider relevant. What you ignore tends to disappear from memory. What engages you tends to expand. And this applies to both good and difficult times. There's something almost disconcerting about all this. The sense of time you carry isn't a true photograph of reality. It's a narrative. A continuous edit made behind the scenes of the mind. The brain decides, without asking permission, what deserves to last longer and what can pass quickly. And these decisions shape how you interpret your own story. Moments that are too long can seem painful. Moments that are too short can seem wasted. It all depends on how the brain has organized the experience. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this distortion of time doesn't only happen in extreme or obvious situations. It's present in small everyday decisions, in how you react to problems, in how you project the future, and even in your relationship with the past. The brain doesn't just sense time. It uses time as a tool to guide behavior, expectations, and actions. And when you start to perceive this, something changes. Perception ceases to be automatic and becomes something that is observed. Perhaps you've never stopped to think that that constant sense of urgency, that feeling that everything needs to be resolved too quickly, is also related to this internal construction of time. Or that the difficulty in enjoying certain moments doesn't stem from a lack of time, but from how the mind is too busy anticipating the next step. Psychological time doesn't exist in isolation. It mixes with emotions, beliefs, and past experiences. It influences decisions. It alters the perception of impact. It redefines what seems important or disposable. When you understand that this experience is universal, something eases. It's not a personal failing. It's not a lack of focus. It's not chronic inattention. It's human functioning. We are all going through the world with an internal clock that adjusts itself all the time without warning. Sometimes it speeds up. Sometimes it slows down. And it almost never coincides perfectly with the clock on the wall. This realization opens the door to something greater. To a silent transformation in how you observe your own days. Not in the sense of controlling time, but of understanding how it is constructed within you. And when this understanding begins to form, time ceases to be merely something that passes, and begins to become something that reveals. Comment below, that makes sense to me. At some point in this reflection, an idea begins to form silently, almost uncomfortably. It doesn't arrive as a ready-made answer, but as an internal turning point. One of those that, after it happens, changes the way you look at seemingly simple things. Because the truth is this, and it often surprises when spoken aloud, time is not something you directly perceive. It's something the brain constructs. This sounds strange at first. After all, time seems to be everywhere. Clocks, calendars, deadlines, birthdays, appointments, aging. Everything revolves around it. But observe more carefully. The clock measures time. It divides the day into equal parts, indifferent to how you feel. It moves at the same pace whether you are anxious, in love, bored, or in danger. The hand doesn't speed up or slow down for you. It simply keeps going. But your experience, that never follows exactly the same rhythm. And this is where the turning point happens. Physical time exists as a measure. But lived time, the time that weighs, that slips away, that disappears, happens within the mind. It is not in the external world. It is in the background of the brain, being assembled at every instant from fragmented signals. Emotions, attention, memory, expectation, everything enters into this invisible equation. The brain takes these elements and constructs a continuous narrative that you call the passage of time. This construction is not conscious. You don't choose to feel time slower or faster. It happens automatically because the brain isn't concerned with being precise. It's concerned with being functional. With helping you survive, decide, act. Time, in this context, becomes a psychological tool. It adjusts according to need. If something demands maximum attention, time expands. If something is irrelevant, time compresses. If something generates emotional impact, time gains density. If it doesn't, it slips away without leaving a trace. This explains why two people can experience the same event and come away with completely different perceptions of how long that moment lasted. It's not because one was right and the other wrong. It's because each brain constructed time according to its own interpretation of the situation. The sensation of time is subjective, but it's not random. It follows internal, silent rules that we rarely notice. There's a hidden truth in all of this that often goes unnoticed. When you say you don't have time, what you often lack is mental space. The overloaded brain goes into economy mode. It shortens perception. It accelerates the subjective passage of time because it's too busy anticipating, solving, deciding. The result is a constant feeling of urgency, of rushing, of life passing by too quickly. Not because the day has become shorter, but because the mind has become too full. And the opposite also happens. In moments of emptiness, of waiting, of lack of stimulation, the brain does the opposite. It amplifies perception. Every second gains weight. Every minute seems to demand effort. Time becomes almost physical. This is not punishment. It's a signal. The brain is saying that that state offers nothing worth processing. And paradoxically, the more you try to force time to pass, the more it seems to resist. When you understand that time doesn't exist outside of you, something begins to reorganize in your mindset. Your relationship with routine changes. Your relationship with the past changes. Your relationship with the future also changes. Because the past, when observed from a distance, isn't a faithful sequence of days. It's a collection of memories organized by emotional relevance. That's why certain years seem enormous and others seem to have disappeared. The brain doesn't store time. It stores meaning. This perception has a direct impact on how you make decisions. If the brain associates a certain type of experience with a long and arduous time, you tend to avoid it. If it associates it with a fast and fluid time, you tend to seek it out. Many choices that seem rational are, in fact, influenced by this internal construction of time. The mind learns where time hurts and where it passes effortlessly, and it acts accordingly. There is something almost liberating in this revelation. Because if lived time is a construct, then it can also be observed. Not absolutely controlled but understood. And understanding generates transformation. Not in the sense of manipulating every second, but of perceiving the patterns. Of noticing when time is dragging on and asking what is missing. Or when it is passing too quickly and asking what is being ignored. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this construction of time doesn't just happen in the immediate present. It influences how you project the future. Expectations alter perception even before the event happens. Anticipation can lengthen the time before something desired or feared. Anxiety creates overly long futures. Hope can shorten paths. Psychological time doesn't respect a straight line. It bends according to the internal narrative that the brain creates. Behind the scenes of the mind, time acts as an invisible editor of reality. It cuts scenes, stretches others, accelerates transitions. And you live believing you're seeing everything as it is. But, in truth, you're living a version organized to make sense, not to be faithful. This difference changes everything. Because when you realize this, you begin to look at your own journey with different eyes. Time ceases to be merely something that escapes you, and becomes something that reveals how you are living. This revelation doesn't close the question. On the contrary, it opens up even more space to understand how the brain sustains the sensation moment by moment, and why, even knowing all this, time continues to seem so real. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. If you observe a little more closely, you begin to realize that the brain has never been a passive spectator of reality. It doesn't sit, watch the world unfold, and record everything exactly as it happened. It interferes all the time. It chooses. It cuts. It highlights. It rearranges. And when it comes to time, this interference becomes even more profound. The brain doesn't measure time like a cold, impartial stopwatch. It acts as an invisible editor, working behind the scenes of experience to transform events into a sensation of duration. Think about how film editing works. Hours of footage become minutes of narrative. Important scenes gain more space. Irrelevant moments are discarded. The rhythm changes according to the emotion you want to evoke. The brain does something very similar in your life. It doesn't count seconds. It organizes events. It gives emotional weight to some moments and reduces others to simple transitions. And it is from this constant editing that the sensation of time you carry is born. That's why 2 days with exactly 24 hours can seem completely different. One might seem endless. The other might disappear. The difference isn't in the clock. It's in the number of significant events, the emotional intensity, the level of attention, and how all of that was recorded by memory. The time you perceive isn't a faithful recording of what happened, it's an addition. When something unexpected happens, the brain wakes up. It pays attention. It registers details. Memory expands. Time seems longer, denser. When everything repeats itself, when nothing catches the eye, the brain conserves energy. It summarizes. It compacts. And time seems short when you look back. This silent logic shapes how you perceive weeks, months, and even years of your own journey. There's a hidden truth in this that's rarely stated directly. The brain uses time as a tool for meaning making. What matters gains duration. What doesn't matter is compressed. This applies to both external experiences and internal states. Intense emotions stretch time. Automatic states shorten it. Attention prolongs it. Distraction erases it. The sensation of duration arises from this dynamic combination of event, emotion, focus, and memory. And memory plays an even deeper role than it seems. It doesn't just store what happened. It reorganizes. It reconstructs. It retells the story. Often, the time you remember isn't the time you lived, but the time that was reconstructed afterward. A day full of small novelties can seem long in retrospect. A repetitive period can seem like it never existed. The brain doesn't archive raw time. It archives narratives. This explains why certain moments from the past seem so vivid, almost present, while others dissolve. It's not because one lasted longer than the other. It's because one was edited with more emotion, more meaning, more impact. Subjective duration is born from this emotional editing. Psychological time is a work assembled in layers, not a continuous line. When you understand this, you begin to realize that many feelings of haste, delay, or stagnation don't come from the external world, but from how the brain is organizing the experience. A day full of tasks but without engagement can seem heavy and dragging. An intense but meaningful day can seem light and fast. The difference lies less in what you did and more in how the brain decided to register it. This process directly influences the mindset with which you approach your own life. If the brain learns that certain types of experiences go by quickly, you tend to seek them out. If it learns that others take too long, you tend to avoid them. Thus, the internal editor begins to influence decisions, habits, and choices of path. Without realizing it, you begin to live guided not by real time but by edited time. There's something almost disconcerting about all this. Because even knowing that the brain edits reality, the sensation of time continues to seem solid, objective, indisputable. You feel that that minute was long. You feel that that year passed quickly. The sensation is real. The impact is real. What isn't faithful is the way that sensation was constructed. And that difference completely changes how you interpret your own story. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this editing of time doesn't only happen when something extraordinary occurs. It happens all the time, in small decisions, in seemingly banal moments. Every time your attention is fragmented, time reorganizes itself. Every time your mind anticipates the future or revisits the past, the present is edited. The brain is constantly adjusting the rhythm of experience to maintain internal coherence, even if it means distorting perception. Behind the scenes of the mind, there is a continuous editing process. The brain decides what becomes the main scene and what gets a hard cut. It decides what deserves an emotional soundtrack and what can be silence. And you live within this narrative believing you are seeing everything as it is. But, in reality, you are living a version carefully constructed to make sense, not to be accurate. This understanding brings about a kind of internal shift. An invitation to observation. Not to try to control time, but to perceive how it is being edited within you. When time drags on, perhaps it's not a lack of time, but an excess of emptiness. When time disappears, perhaps it's not a lack of attention, but an excess of involvement. These revelations don't end the mystery. They expand it. Because if the time you perceive is an edit, an even deeper question arises. Who is holding that invisible camera inside your mind? How does the brain decide, moment by moment, what deserves to last longer and what can pass too quickly? Comment below, that makes sense to me. At some point in life, almost everyone has realized that time doesn't react to events in a neutral way. It behaves as if it has a personality. As if it responds to what you feel, not to what the clock shows. This perception usually arises first intuitively, almost silently, before even becoming a reflection. You feel it. Only then do you try to understand. And when you start observing more attentively, something becomes clear. Emotion is one of the most powerful forces in distorting time. When fear enters the scene, time seems to slow down. Not subtly but almost brutally. A fright, an unexpected risk, a moment when everything spirals out of control. The body reacts before reason. The heart races, breathing changes, the senses become heightened. And suddenly, seconds transform into an extensive sequence of perceptions. You notice details that would normally go unnoticed. Sounds, movements, expressions. It's as if the world has slowed down so that you can react. Time stretches because the brain needs more information to make quick decisions. It's not an illusion. It's adaptation. This effect doesn't happen because the brain wants to deceive you, but because it needs to protect you. Fear activates ancient circuits, deeply linked to survival. And behind the scenes, the perception of time is adjusted to increase your chances of responding. Time slows down because, at that instant, every fraction of a second can mean impact, change, consequence. The feeling is so strong that many people carry these memories as if they lasted much longer than they actually did. At the opposite extreme there is boredom. And boredom does something curious. It doesn't slow down time to help. It slows it down to annoy. When there isn't enough stimulation, when nothing holds your attention, the brain enters a state of frustrated waiting. It finds no meaning, no challenge, no novelty. And, without these elements, time drags on. Every minute seems heavy. The clock becomes a silent enemy. You look away, look again. And almost nothing has changed. This dragging on isn't mental laziness. It's a sign of low emotional stimulation. The brain is signaling that the experience isn't offering impact, learning, or reward. And, therefore, it amplifies the perception of time as a way to highlight the discomfort. Boredom doesn't just occupy time. It distorts the sensation of duration. It makes time weigh heavily on the body and mind. And then there is pleasure. perhaps the most treacherous of all. Because when something generates genuine engagement, time simply accelerates. An activity that absorbs. A conversation that flows. A moment of deep connection. The brain enters a state of natural focus. It stops monitoring time as an important variable. All that matters is the experience itself. And when you realize it, hours have passed as if they were minutes. Time hasn't disappeared. It has been ignored. This acceleration is not carelessness. It's emotional efficiency. The brain recognizes that state as positive, safe, and rewarding. And therefore it sees no need to fragment the experience. Lets it flow. The result is an almost magical feeling of temporal lightness. But this same lightness, when observed later, can generate strangeness. The impression that time passed too quickly. That something could have been enjoyed more. Fear, boredom, and pleasure don't alter time itself. They alter how the brain organizes experience. When emotions change, time changes along with them. This phrase sums up something profound. Psychological time is an emotional variable. It is shaped according to the internal state. And this explains why the same interval can be experienced in radically different ways in different contexts. This understanding generates immediate identification because it touches on something lived, not theoretical. We have all experienced days that seemed endless and others that disappeared. We have all felt the emotional impact of time in critical situations and the lightness in moments of pleasure. And realizing that this is not a personal failing, but rather a functioning of the brain, changes the way you relate to these sensations. There's a silent transformation when you understand this. You begin to realize that many of the decisions you make daily are influenced by how you anticipate the experience of time. You avoid what seems long and burdensome. You seek what seems quick and easy. Even without realizing it, the brain uses temporal expectation as a criterion. This shapes habits, routines, and life choices. Time ceases to be merely a backdrop and becomes an active agent in the journey. Behind the scenes of the mind, emotion and time walk hand in hand. They feed off each other. Intense emotions expand time. Neutral states compress it. And this affects how you construct memory, meaning, and identity. The hidden truth is that we don't remember life as a continuous sequence, but as emotional blocks. The time between these blocks often disappears from the narrative. It is precisely this type of revelation that amplifies the impact of what we are exploring here. This is what we explore here on Dark Human Science. Not just the strange phenomena of the brain, but the invisible gears that shape human experience without asking permission. Understanding how emotion distorts time is understanding how the mind edits reality itself. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this emotional distortion of time doesn't only operate in extreme or obvious moments. It influences how you interpret past choices, how you project the future, and how you experience the present. Anticipated emotions begin to shape time even before the event happens. Anxiety lengthens the future. Expectation shortens paths. Frustration weighs down the present. Psychological time begins to be edited even before it exists as a concrete experience. When you realize this, something changes in your mindset. You begin to observe not only what you are experiencing, but how you are feeling while experiencing it. And this observation opens space for understanding, not for rigid control, but for awareness. Time continues to pass. But the way it unfolds begins to reveal more about you than about the clock. This realization doesn't solve the mystery. It only deepens it. Because if emotion and time are so intimately linked, an inevitable question arises. To what extent is what you call real actually a continuous emotional construct? Write this down. I'm on this journey too. There comes a point where the perception of time ceases to depend on what is happening now and begins to be shaped by something much more silent. Memory. It is in this territory that time reveals one of its deepest distortions. Because, unlike what we learn intuitively, time doesn't end when the moment is over. It continues to be worked on, reorganized, and reinterpreted afterward, behind the scenes of the mind. The past is not a static archive. It is a constantly being edited process. When you look back and try to remember a period of your life, you don't access a continuous line of days. You access fragments, scenes, sensations, emotional milestones. And it is the quantity, intensity, and diversity of these memories that define how long that period lasted. It seems it has lasted. 2 months can seem like a year. A year can seem like a blur. Not because the calendar has changed, but because memory has decided what is worth keeping. Imagine a moment full of new experiences. A trip. The beginning of a new phase. A period of transformation. Many new experiences, many different stimuli, many emotions being processed. When you revisit that period later, it seems long, dense, almost expansive. There are many memories to support the narrative. The brain finds enough material to reconstruct that time with rich detail. The result is the feeling that it lasted a long time. Now compare that to highly repetitive periods. Rigid routine. Similar days. Few variations. Few emotionally significant events. When you try to remember later, there are almost no points of reference. Memories overlap. Days blur together. And that entire period seems short, compressed, almost non-existent. Not because you didn't live it, but because the brain found nothing noteworthy. That's where an uncomfortable revelation comes in for many people. Time is not decided in the present, it is re-evaluated in the past. The sense of duration you carry today about a period of your life was constructed after it ended. Memory acts as a belated editor, revising what happened and retroactively assigning weight. Psychological time is a later reading, not a direct measurement. This explains why you often only realize how quickly something passed after it's over. During the moment, it seemed normal. Afterwards, looking back, you get the feeling that everything slipped through your fingers. It's not that you weren't present. It's that your memory didn't find enough variety to extend that narrative. The brain doesn't record hours. It records differences. This mechanism has a profound impact on how you perceive your own journey. It influences the feeling of aging, the impression that the years are passing faster. Over time, many people fall into predictable cycles. Fewer first times. Fewer surprises. Fewer pattern disruptions. And, for memory, less material. The result is a past that seems increasingly shorter, even as the present continues to unfold at the same physical pace. This perception often generates a silent unease. A feeling of loss that doesn't exactly have a clear object. It's not longing for something specific. It's the impression that time is slipping away. But when you understand the role of memory in all of this, the narrative changes. The problem isn't time itself. It's the way it's being recorded. The brain needs novelty, emotion, and meaning to expand temporal perception in retrospect. It doesn't have to be something grand. It needs to be different. It needs to break the automatic routine. When everything becomes a habit, memory goes into economy mode. It summarizes. It compacts. It cuts. And you only realize this later when you try to remember. There is something powerful in this observation because it shifts the discussion from time to the realm of experience. It's not a question of having more time, but of live in a way that time leaves its mark. Memory doesn't thrive on quantity. It thrives on contrast. And this has direct implications for the mindset with which you approach choices, routines, and decisions. Many people believe that life is passing by too quickly, when in reality it is being lived in a way that is too repetitive. This is a hidden truth that is not always comfortable to face. Because it shifts a part of the responsibility inward. Not in the sense of guilt, but of awareness. The brain is not stealing time. It is simply reacting to what it receives. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this reassessment of time through memory doesn't just affect how you look back. It directly influences how you project the future. The expectation that it will pass quickly, or it will take too long, stems from past experiences recorded by memory. The brain uses the past as an emotional yardstick to anticipate the duration of what hasn't happened yet. If similar experiences have been marked as long and arduous, the future gains weight even before it arrives. If they have been marked as light and quick, the future seems short, almost irrelevant. This shapes behavior. It shapes motivation. It shapes resistance or openness. The future begins to be edited before it exists, based on the remembered past. And there's an even more subtle detail. Memory isn't neutral. It's influenced by the current emotional state. An overwhelmed present tends to perceive the past as shorter. A more conscious present tends to recall more details. This means that the sensation of time isn't just retrospective, but dynamic. It changes as you change. When you realize this, something internally reorganizes itself. The relationship with the past ceases to be merely nostalgia or regret. It becomes a source of understanding. A way to understand how you have lived, not how long you have lived. Time begins to reveal patterns. It reveals where there was presence, where there was automatism, where there was impact, where there was erasure. This understanding doesn't settle the question of time. It opens up an even deeper one. Because if the past is constantly rewriting the duration of your life, an inevitable question arises. What, exactly, makes a moment worth remembering as long? Comment below, that makes sense to me. At some point in this journey, when everything starts to fall into place, a strange, almost hypnotic feeling emerges. As if the ground becomes a little less solid. Because if time is edited by emotion, reevaluated by memory, and reconstructed after it has passed, then what exactly is the now? This question seems simple, but it carries one of the most perplexing mysteries of human experience. And the answer is not comfortable. The brain doesn't live in the immediate present. It never has. There's always a slight delay between what happens in the world and what reaches your consciousness. A few milliseconds. A tiny interval, imperceptible to you but absolutely crucial. In that interval, the brain collects fragmented sensory information, compares it with past experiences, adjusts expectations, fills in gaps, and only then delivers a coherent version of reality. The now you feel has already happened. It's a reconstruction. This changes everything. Because the feeling of absolute presence, that intimate certainty that you are living the exact moment things are happening, is, in fact, a functional illusion. Necessary, yes. Comfortable most of the time. But still an illusion. The brain needs to give you the feeling of continuity so that reality doesn't become chaotic. And to do that, it accepts always living one step behind, assembling the present as if editing is seen in real time. You never live in the present. You live the version that your brain has managed to construct. This phrase is not a poetic metaphor. It describes a concrete process. While you believe you are in direct contact with the present moment, the brain is working behind the scenes, stitching together recent past, immediate expectations and current stimuli into a single narrative. The present is a sophisticated collage. This continuous reconstruction explains why the world seems stable, even though it is an incessant flow of change. Your eyes don't see everything at once. Your ears don't capture each sound in isolation. Your body doesn't process all sensations simultaneously. The brain selects, organizes, simplifies. And in this process, time ceases to be an exact line and becomes a malleable surface, adjusted to make sense. There's something profoundly philosophical about this. Because the idea of living in the now is sold as an absolute truth, almost as an ideal of personal transformation. But the pure, raw, unedited now, that's not accessible to human consciousness. What exists is a reconstructed present, slightly delayed, but coherent enough to seem immediate. The brain doesn't deliver reality as it is. It delivers reality as it needs to be for you to function. This delay is not a flaw. It's a strategy. Without it, the world would be sensory chaos. Disconnected sounds, fragmented images, sensations without continuity. The brain needs this small interval to create a stable experience. And the price of this stability is the loss of direct access to the real moment. You always live in the almost now. When you understand this, you begin to realize why certain situations seem unreal, as if you were outside your own body. In moments of shock, trauma, or extreme surprise, this reconstruction fails for a few moments. The brain takes longer to assemble the scene. And the sensation is one of displacement, as if the present had shattered. It's not that the world has become strange. It's that the editing process has become slower. This understanding also sheds new light on impulsive decisions, regrets, and automatic reactions. Often you act even before consciously realizing what is happening. The brain anticipates. It predicts. It acts based on already known patterns because waiting for awareness to arrive would be too slow. The hidden truth is that a large part of your decisions happen in that invisible space between the event and conscious perception. The present, then, is not a fixed point. It is a reconstructed flow. A dynamic field where the recent past and the immediate future blend together. The brain is constantly making bets on what is happening now, using probabilities, expectations, and past experiences. When these bets are right, you feel fluidity. When they are wrong, you feel strangeness. This explains curious phenomena such as the sensation of déjà vu, lapses in attention, moments when you react before understanding. All of this stems from this continuous process of reconstruction. The brain is always trying to be ahead even while living slightly behind. It lives in a constant dance between prediction and correction. Psychological time is born from this dance. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this lag in the present doesn't just affect sensory perception. It influences how you construct identity, continuity, and meaning. The idea of self depends on this continuous temporal narrative. If the present were too fragmented, the feeling of being someone over time would be lost. The brain uses this reconstruction to sustain the feeling of a stable self, traversing life's journey. Behind the scenes of the mind, time is the thread that weaves it all together. It connects experiences, gives coherence to memory, allows for projections of the future. But this thread is not linear. It is constantly being adjusted. And you live believing you are standing on something solid when, in reality, you are walking on a constantly rearranging surface. This revelation is not meant to cause gratuitous discomfort. It serves to broaden perception, to show that what seems most immediate, the now, is, paradoxically, one of the brain's most sophisticated constructs. And, if this is true, then understanding time is not just about understanding clocks or calendars. It's about understanding how the mind creates reality. This idea doesn't end the reflection. It opens an even more intriguing door. Because if the present arrives already edited, delayed, and reconstructed, what happens when the brain starts mixing this reconstruction with predictions of the future? Write this down, I'm on this journey too. After going through all of this, the question arises almost on its own, without asking permission. It doesn't come as superficial curiosity, but as an internal need to organize what has been revealed so far. So, is time real or an illusion? The most honest answer is neither simple nor comfortable. Because it requires two truths to coexist at the same time, even if they seem contradictory. Physical time exists. It is measurable. It is predictable. It obeys laws that are independent of you. A second remains a second, whether you are afraid, bored, or deeply involved in something. The clock does not negotiate with emotions. The calendar does not adjust to your perception. The physical world keeps moving forward, indifferent to how you experience the passage of time. To ignore this would be to deny objective reality. But at the same time, the experience of time, the one that truly shapes your life, doesn't happen on this external plane. It happens within the mind. And there, time ceases to be rigid. It becomes malleable, elastic, sensitive to context. The subjective experience of time doesn't follow the same rules as the clock. It follows the rules of perception, emotion, memory, and anticipation. It is in this space that time gains texture, weight, speed. These two layers coexist all the time. While physical time moves steadily forward, psychological time dances. It accelerates, decelerates, fragments, lengthens. And you live at the intersection of these two realities, believing they are one and the same. But they are not. The clock measures time. The mind tells stories about him. When you start to see things this way, something changes in your mindset. Many anxieties related to time cease to be absolute mysteries and become signs. The feeling that time is passing too quickly may reveal excessive repetition. The feeling that time isn't passing may reveal a lack of meaning. The problem isn't time itself, but the way it's being lived, recorded, and reinterpreted. There's a hidden truth in all of this that's rarely confronted. You don't live within time. You live within the interpretation that your brain makes of you. And this interpretation is shaped by choices, habits, attention, and emotional states. The impact of this is profound. Because it means that the relationship you have with time says much more about your inner journey than about the number of hours available. This understanding doesn't transform time into something controllable, as if it were possible to slow down or speed up life at will. But it transforms how you position yourself in relation to it. Time ceases to be merely an enemy that escapes or a force that presses upon you. It becomes a mirror. A silent indicator of how you are living, what is being prioritized, what is being ignored. Behind the scenes of the mind, time functions as an invisible narrator. It doesn't report everything. It selects. It emphasizes. It omits. And this narrative shapes the sense of continuity in your life. When you look back and feel that something passed too quickly, perhaps your brain is telling you that there was little contrast. When you feel that something lasted an eternity, perhaps it's saying that there was intense emotional impact. Psychological time is not neutral. It carries meaning. This perspective also changes how you think about the future. The future is not just a distant point on the calendar. It is constantly anticipated by the mind, laden with emotional expectations. Something you fear tends to seem longer before it even happens. Something you desire tends to seem shorter. The brain begins to edit future time using the same tools it uses to edit the past. Emotion, memory, prediction. Time ceases to be a straight line and becomes a field of subjective possibilities. When all of this falls into place, the initial question takes on a new dimension. Is time real? Yes, in the physical world. But life isn't lived on that abstract plane. It's lived in experience. And in experience, time is a story that is constantly being rewritten. Time is real on the clock, but in your mind it's a constantly changing story. This sentence doesn't settle the matter. It summarizes the paradox. Because to live as a human being is to accept this duality. To accept that there is an objective world relentlessly advancing and, at the same time, an inner world shaping how this advancement is felt. Neither can be ignored. But confusing one with the other generates suffering. When you expect physical time to respect your inner experience, frustration arises. When you ignore the impact of inner experience, emptiness arises. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this distinction between physical time and psychological time opens up something even more unsettling. If the mind constructs the experience of time, to what extent does it also influence the feeling of cause, effect, and continuity in life itself? At what point does this construction begin to affect how you understand who you are, where you came from, and where you think you are going? Comment below, that makes sense to me. As all these layers overlap, something begins to bother you in a different way. It's not a shock. It's not explicit fear. It's a silent, almost elegant discomfort that settles in when you realize that what always seems so solid might not be. Because if time can slow down in fear, speed up in pleasure, lengthen in memory and compress in repetition, if the present arrives late and the past is constantly re-edited, then the experience you call life is not exactly what you imagine it to be. There's a subtle transformation when this idea starts to make sense. It's not a dramatic twist, nor an immediate cinematic revelation. It's more like when you slightly shift your focus and realize you were seeing everything in a limited way. The world is still there, but something has changed in how you interpret it. Time ceases to be just a line you travel along and becomes a field that molds itself to your perception. This is impactful because it dismantles one of the most basic certainties of daily life, the idea that you are fully aware of your own life as it unfolds. The hidden truth is that much of your experience passes through filters, shortcuts, and automatic edits. The brain doesn't ask if you want to perceive everything. It decides what is worth reaching you. And in this process, entire pieces of reality simply don't make it into the narrative. It's not about living less. It's about perceiving less. Many moments don't disappear because they were short, but because they were lived automatically. Others become enormous not because they lasted a long time, but because they left deep marks. Psychological time doesn't measure duration. It measures impact. And that completely changes how you can look at your own journey. When you look back and feel that certain periods passed too quickly, perhaps it wasn't time that failed you. Perhaps it was your attention span. When you feel that other periods were long and burdensome, perhaps it wasn't the clock that was wrong, but the emotional baggage involved. Time begins to reveal itself as a silent messenger of your mindset at each stage of life. This discomfort grows when you realize that important decisions are often made within this temporal distortion. You avoid paths that seem too long. You cling to shortcuts that seem too quick. You procrastinate because the future seems distant. You rush because the present seems short. The brain uses perceived time as a criterion, even when you believe you are being purely rational. Behind the scenes, the subjective experience of time guides choices much more than you imagine. And perhaps the most unsettling part is realizing that you don't perceive all of this while it's happening. Understanding comes later. Always later. The lived experience only becomes clear when it has already become a memory. The present is too fleeting to be analyzed as it unfolds. It can only be felt. And even that feeling arrives already edited, delayed, reconstructed. Consciousness is always one step behind its own experience. This doesn't have to be seen as something negative, but it also can't be ignored. Because when you understand how this works, a different question begins to emerge. Not about how to control time, but about how to relate to it better. About how to create more memorable moments. About how to break out of autopilot more often. About how to live in a way that memory doesn't compress everything afterward. This reflection doesn't offer ready-made answers. It brings unease. And unease is a powerful sign that something important has been touched. Time ceases to be merely a neutral backdrop and becomes a sensitive indicator of presence, meaning, and impact. It reveals where you were fully present and where you passed by without truly being there. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's one last layer to this mystery that connects everything we've talked about so far. A layer that deals not only with perception, emotion, or memory, but with the very feeling of the continuity of life. That which makes you feel that there is a self-traversing time, even when time seems to bend, accelerate, or disappear. And it is here that the final question begins to resonate, not as a conclusion, but as an opening. A question that does not demand an immediate answer, but observation throughout the experience itself. That if time can expand, shrink, and even distort, how much of your life have you truly noticed? Comment below, that makes sense to me. If you've made it this far, it's because something along the way has touched you. Perhaps not as a ready-made answer, but as a question that has been echoing. And that, in itself, says a lot. When content not only informs you but makes you stop, rethink, and observe your own experience more attentively, it ceases to be just a video and becomes part of your journey. If this reflection on time, perception, and how the brain constructs reality made sense to you, subscribe to the channel not as an automatic gesture, but as a conscious choice to continue exploring these kinds of questions. Those that don't resolve quickly but gradually change the way you see things. And if you want to leave a sign that you were with me until the end, write in the comments, "That message was for me." Sometimes, a simple phrase can carry an entire understanding. Comments end up becoming a space where these perceptions meet, acknowledge each other, and deepen. If at any point you felt that silent connection, that feeling of, "This moved me," leave a like on the video. It's a subtle way of saying that this conversation was worth the time you dedicated to it, and it helps this type of content continue to exist and reach other curious minds like yours. And before you leave, there's a video here that perfectly complements this reflection. It follows a different path but touches on the same sensitive point of perception and consciousness. Click and stay with me there. Sometimes, an idea only fully reveals itself when you look at it from a different angle. Initially, the question was simple: why does time seem so real even when it isn't? Perhaps now you realize that what is most unsettling is not time itself, but the way he walks right past you without asking permission. This is dark human science, where perception is not reality.